And then the next idea is that the fragile younger generation take. And is this the strongest signal of his worldview? This generation, according to him, is more fragile. You need to show them how to earn things. It's an interesting point. A lot of people have that point. Is this premise true as a general statement? First, how do we define strong? Is it mentally strong? Is it physically strong? Psychologically strong? Is it all of those things, etc.? And perhaps the strongest people of this generation are not on the internet. And I think what's important here is that maybe the premise of people were stronger back then, and when we say back then, what do we mean? Because human history is a long time. It's looking at the environments, because environments are part of creating people. So if you have this particular environment, you can get this particular outcome. But then if you have a different type of environment, then you get a different type of outcome. And I guess that you could assert that someone who is tough, who is extremely mentally tough, may have come from a very extreme circumstance, which then leaves the question, do those circumstances exist? And clearly, I think those circumstances do exist, but do they exist in the same mass, in the same majority? I'm not sure. The world is forever changing. If you look at the British context, there's a struggling economy, you could argue. There's inflation. There are certain issues. And when you live in that type of political environment, it can change people psychologically. The notion is that it can make people tougher. However, even if the example is true, and even if the premise is true, we can clearly give examples of strong human beings today. David Goggins, from the outside looking in, I don't know him personally, but from what is portrayed and from the anecdotal evidence and what's portrayed on the internet, he seems like a very, very strong individual, extremely strong. If it's 1 to 100, he seems to be on that scale of 100. Alex Hormozy seems to be a mentally very strong person, but for different reasons. Even though he does do fitness, his mental strength seems to come from, again, allegedly being able to do 12, 16-hour days of complete productivity. It's also important here to distinguish the person from the marketing. And sometimes it's hard to know which is the objective truth. But if we accept the premise, if we accept the marketing, that's two strong individuals in different ways. But even if we look at boxing, Usyk, very, very mentally tough individual, fighting for his people and has fought through a variety of crises in the ring. And then you have Tyson Fury, who showed immense courage when he got up against Deontay Wilder. How he got up was unbelievable stuff. That was like pure cinema. And AJ recently against Pringle shown incredible toughness. And he's shown toughness before. Check out that Klitschko fight. So there are clear mentally strong people or strong people today. But I think that Canelo, when he says that, he's saying something that a lot of other people are saying. And therefore it's important to kind of engage with this dialogue. Where does it come from? I think a lot of it is due to environment. I think a lot of things are due to environment. I think a lot of strong people are born in very tough environments. So that's the question, isn't it? The question is why. You know, you look at Rocky Marciano. I think when you ask the question, maybe the bravest boxers in the world, I can think of two names, Rocky Marciano and Evander Holyfield. And what created those type of warriors? Probably the environment. Rocky Marciano, I don't know too much about his childhood, but I know that his preparation was vicious. Apparently he had these massive punch bags. Like his punch bags were bigger than any other contemporary heavyweight punch bags. So he had like specially designed punch bags, and he would have torturous training. And that would be part of his psychological toughness. Evander Holyfield at the time was seen as the best conditioned heavyweight ever at the time. And that was part of his psychological toughness. And you can see when they went through difficult moments in the ring, they were able to cope. They were able to handle a crisis. And perhaps that comes from the strong environments that they came from, whether it's upbringing or whether it's what they put themselves through in preparation for fights. It's a very interesting observation. And then the next idea is that Canelo says, I don't have what I have, but I don't need anything of this. I was happy. And I think what he's saying here is that he says he was happy as a kid. And when he was a kid, he was selling ice cream on buses, and that his father never showed him the hard times, which I'm assuming was objectively, he was in a hard situation. It's interesting here, really interesting situation here, that from one sense, the money does not define him. So money is not important. But then you say, well, if money is not important, his starting point for a rematch with Crawford is 100 million. But let me counter with that, because maybe both realities can be true. Maybe you can be a hard negotiator saying that this is my worth, is 100 million, but at the same time, the money doesn't define you and the money doesn't change you. Because as I always say, or I've said various times, I don't think all money is good money. But of course, in capitalism, money can solve big problems. It can solve problems, but it can also create new problems. For a reference point, look at lottery winners. You could say the winner's tax. There's anecdotal information about people winning large sums of money, but then going into either depression or either losing all their money and then going into a real sad part of their life. So money doesn't necessarily solve all your problems. And perhaps the lesson here is that when your happiness is not tied to money, that's actually a good place to be mentally. And a lot of boxers struggle, even the 1% boxers. And remember, in boxing, in the hierarchy of boxing, the 1% make the majority of the money, which is different to the UFC model. But even the 1% of boxers, they seem to struggle the most, because the more money you have, the more you have to lose. I guess the higher the mountain, the bigger the drop.